The phone rang at sunset, sharp and sudden, like a warning Clara Whitmore didn't know she needed. She was standing alone on the porch of her small Colorado rental. The sky wide and orange, the air quiet enough to hear her own breathing. She almost let the call go to voicemail. Almost, then she saw the name on the screen and felt a slow chill move through her chest. Frank Miller. Her stepfather never called unless something was wrong or unless something was about to be made wrong. Clara answered, her voice steady even though her hand tightened around the phone. "Hello, Frank." He didn't bother with greetings. His voice came loud and careless, edged with humor. "I figured I should tell you myself," he said. "I sold your mountain cabin." The words landed hard, but Clara didn't speak yet. She waited, like a person bracing for an aftershock. Frank laughed. "Relax. I needed to settle some gambling debts. No big deal." The world seemed to pause. The wind stopped. The birds went quiet. Clara's heart dropped into a heavy, aching place she hadn't visited in years. "My cabin?" she asked slowly. "The one in Montana?" "That's the one," Frank said easily. "You weren't using it. Waste of space, really." Clara closed her eyes. That cabin wasn't just wood and land. It was the last thing her father had left behind before cancer took him piece by piece. He had built it with his own hands, board by board, in the years when his health was still strong. It was where Clara learned how to skip stones, where she read her first novels by firelight, where her parents once danced in the kitchen to old country music. "You didn't have the right," Clara said, her voice low. "That cabin was never yours." Frank snorted. "Paperwork can be fixed. You live your life in cities now. You won't even miss it." He laughed again, louder this time, like he was proud of himself, then ended the call. Clara stood frozen, phone still pressed to her ear, listening to silence. Her chest felt tight, not from anger, but from grief. It was the kind of pain that felt old and familiar, like reopening a scar you hoped had healed. Frank had always been like this, charming to strangers, reckless behind closed doors. After her mother died, he had drifted from job to job, habit to habit, always chasing luck and losing it. Clara had kept her distance for years, protecting what little peace she had built. She went inside and sat on the couch, staring at the wall. Night fell without her noticing. The cabin replayed in her mind: snow on the roof, the creak of the wooden floor, the smell of pine and coffee in the morning. It had been her safe place, the one place that still felt like family. And then there was Ethan. The memory came without warning. Ethan Cole, the caretaker's son, tall, quiet, kind, in a way that didn't demand attention. They had met when Clara was 19, spending summers at the cabin after her father got sick. Ethan knew every trail, every change in the weather. He spoke softly, listened carefully, and made her feel understood without trying. They had never promised each other anything. Life had pulled them in different directions. College for Clara, work for Ethan, but the feeling had stayed, gentle and unfinished. That night, Clara barely slept. She paced, replayed the call, tried to make sense of how Frank could even sell something he didn't own. By morning, exhaustion turned into clarity. She needed answers. Not over the phone. Not from Frank. She booked a flight to Montana. The drive from the airport took hours, each mile tightening the knot in her chest. The road narrowed as the mountains rose around her. Pine trees lined the highway, just as she remembered. Her hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel. When she turned onto the gravel road leading to the cabin, her heart raced. She expected to see strangers, a locked gate, a sign declaring ownership changed. Instead, she saw smoke rising from the chimney. Lights were on. The cabin stood exactly where it always had, strong and quiet, as if nothing had touched it. Clara parked the car and stepped out slowly. Snow crunched beneath her boots. The air smelled clean and sharp. She walked toward the porch, every step heavy with confusion. Before she could knock, the door opened. Ethan stood there. For a moment, neither of them spoke. He looked older, broader shoulders, lines at the corners of his eyes, but the calm in his face was the same. His expression shifted from surprise to recognition, then to something softer. "Clara," he said, like he wasn't sure she was real. Her breath caught. "Ethan." Time folded in on itself. Years of distance vanished in a second. "What are you doing here?" she asked. He stepped aside, letting her in. "You should sit down." Inside, the cabin felt alive, warm, familiar. Her father's photographs still hung on the walls. The old wooden table stood firm. Nothing had been packed or stripped away. Ethan explained quickly. Frank had tried to sell the cabin in a rush, desperate and careless. The buyer discovered problems with the title. Serious problems. The cabin had been placed in a trust years ago, one Clara's father had quietly arranged, naming Clara the sole beneficiary. Frank had never owned it. Ethan, now a lawyer handling land and property disputes, had been helping a nearby client when the issue crossed his desk. He recognized the address immediately. He stopped the sale and moved into the cabin temporarily to protect it, trying to track Clara down. "He laughed when he called me," Clara said quietly. Ethan's jaw tightened. "He won't be laughing for long." They sat by the fireplace as snow began to fall outside. They talked about lost time, about how life had bent but not broken them. There was no rush, no drama, just a quiet understanding that some things waited patiently. Far away, Frank believed he had won something. But in the mountains, Clara was about to learn the truth. And this time, she wasn't alone. The sun had barely risen over the Montana mountains when Clara Whitmore stepped out of her car, her boots crunching on the frost-covered gravel. Her heart raced with a mix of fear and hope. After the call from Frank, she had expected to find destruction, strangers, or an empty cabin. She had braced herself for loss. But what she saw made her stop in her tracks. The cabin was still there, smoke curling from the chimney, lights glowing warmly through the windows. Every detail she had remembered from childhood, the worn wooden porch, the pine-scented air, even the small garden her father had planted was untouched. "Ow!" As if no one had tried to take it from her. Relief and confusion collided, leaving her momentarily frozen. Before she could reach the door, it swung open. There he was, Fen Cole. Older now, broader, a few more lines around his eyes. But the same calm, steady presence that had comforted her during childhood summers. "Clara?" His voice was soft, tinged with disbelief. She felt her chest tighten. "Ethan," she whispered, barely able to get the word out. Seeing him here at her cabin, safe and intact, felt like a lifeline thrown into turbulent water. Ethan stepped aside, motioning for her to come in. Inside, the cabin smelled of cedar and warmth. The familiar worn rugs were in place. The photographs of her father still hung on the walls. And the fireplace crackled softly, filling the room with golden light. It was as if the years and the chaos of her stepfather's recklessness had never happened. Every corner carried a memory, her father's careful woodworking on the table, the soft hum of old country songs her parents had once played on the radio, the quiet spaces where she had sat with a book and a cup of cocoa. Ethan wasted no time explaining. Frank had tried to sell the cabin fast, desperate to cover his gambling debts. The paperwork was sloppy, rushed, and illegal. The cabin had been placed in a trust years ago by Clara's father, making her the rightful owner. The buyer, realizing the legal complications, had pulled out. Ethan, now a real estate attorney specializing in land trusts, had intercepted the sale while working on a nearby case. He had moved into the cabin temporarily to protect it until Clara could come. Everything was legal, secure, and under her name. Clara felt her knees weaken, relief and lingering fear mingling. Frank's reckless laugh now seemed hollow, meaningless. The cabin, her sanctuary, her father's legacy, was safe. She looked at Ethan, grateful and overwhelmed. His steady gaze, calm and reassuring, gave her a sense of safety she hadn't felt in years. The firelight reflected in his eyes, warm and unflinching. And she realized how much she had missed this presence, this quiet strength. They talked late into the morning. About missed years, the ways life had pulled them apart, and the small regrets that sometimes linger longer than pain. Ethan told her he had thought of her often, hoping she would return, hoping she still remembered the cabin as she had left it. Clara shared her own story of the past few years, the work in the city, the lonely nights, the hollow emptiness that Frank's betrayal had almost caused. The conversation flowed easily, as if the years of silence had only been a temporary pause rather than a barrier outside. The snow began to fall gently, dusting the roof and the trees with sparkling white. Clara watched it settle, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. The mountains seemed to breathe around her, silent witnesses to her return and to the life she had almost lost. She realized that while Frank had tried to steal something precious, he had underestimated her determination and the quiet network of people, like Ethan, who had quietly protected what mattered most. Evening came, and the cabin glowed with the warm light of the fire. Clara and Ethan prepared a simple meal, laughing quietly as they worked side by side. Their hands brushed occasionally, and each touch carried a warmth that was both comforting and new, hinting at the possibility of something deeper than friendship. There was no rush, no pressure, just a slow reconnection, a rediscovery of the bond that had existed quietly through the years. After dinner, they sat near the fireplace, sipping tea, letting the silence stretch comfortably between them. Clara's thoughts drifted to Frank. He had called with arrogance, with the assumption that his actions would hurt her. But in his absence, in the stillness of the cabin, she realized his power had always been temporary. He could threaten, he could lie, he could try to manipulate, but he could not take the love, the memories, or the trust she had in herself and in the people who truly cared for her. Ethan reached for her hand, gently, without urgency, without demand. Clara didn't pull away. She let him hold it, letting the warmth seep into her, into the parts of her that had felt frayed and alone. The gesture was simple, yet it spoke volumes, a promise of support, patience, and presence. In that small touch, she felt a connection that went deeper than words, a sense of belonging that she had not realized she had been searching for all these years. Night fell, and the mountains became a quiet, snow-covered world. Clara sat by the window, looking at the stars and thinking about how close she had come to losing everything that mattered. She understood now that her stepfather's recklessness, while frightening, had inadvertently led her back to what was important: her roots, her memories. And Ethan, she had been given a second chance, not just to reclaim her cabin, but to reclaim her life, her sense of security, and the possibility of love that had always been waiting quietly in the background as the fire crackled softly behind her. Clara felt a new determination settle in her chest. The cabin was hers, legally and emotionally. Her father's legacy was intact. Frank could no longer threaten what was hers by right, nor could he diminish the peace she had fought to preserve. The mountains held her memories, her dreams, and now a path forward. And with Ethan at her side, steady, kind, and unwavering, she realized that some things, trust, love, and home, could not be stolen. Not by luck, not by chance, not by greed. In the quiet of that snowy Montana night, Clara Whitmore finally exhaled. She had faced betrayal, fear, and loss, but she had emerged stronger, grounded, and ready. The cabin, the mountains, and Ethan had reminded her that even when life threatened to unravel, some bonds endure, some homes remain, and some hearts wait patiently for the moment when they can finally be whole again. And in that realization, she found more than safety. She found hope, love, and a promise of a life rebuilt on her terms.